Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time in this conference, so I really appreciate the invitation. And yesterday I presented more on my more mathy work. And I thought that given that lunch is coming up and all that, I would do more conceptual, my more conceptual work today and more data-driven work. So, okay, so, and I wanted to say actually that this talk is going to be about food webs. So we are going from few species to hundreds and even thousands of species. So that's kind of an important thing to talk about. And also that I will be talking about terrestrial versus aquatic food webs. Okay, so first of all, I want you to go back to nature, right? So, and when we see these systems, in these systems, we see that species interact with many other different species, and not just with one type of interaction. Also is who eats whom, but who pollinates whom. So there are mutualistic interactions, there are competitive interactions, and usually in ecological networks, we model these or think of them, even conceptually, just with one type of interaction. So these fields of food web ecology and mutualistic networks, for example, have been traditionally separate. And one of our goals in my lab and collaborators is to integrate them. Integrate them, as I said, this, for example, this pollinator in this mutualistic network is being consumed by predators. And this plant not only is pollinated by pollinators, but also is being consumed by herbivores. So that's the goal. And yesterday I presented much of like our work on mutualistic networks in terms of consumer research interactions that you can do in these networks. And today I will focus more on the other side, on the food web ecology, how you integrate mutualistic interactions into food webs. So to start with everyone on the same page, what we use in our lab, and many people use this model, the allometric traffic network model, in which, first of all, let's talk about the food web for those that are not that are not familiarized with ecological networks. So here we have each node represent a species, and the links connecting the nodes indicate who eats whom. So it's a direct graph. The producers are in the bottom of the network. Then you have the herbivores, the other consumers, all the way to the top predators. And you see here like different names on the right. So those are the different categories you can talk, like trophic levels. The allometric trophic network model models the dynamics of biomasses. So the B and the T, biomass in this case of that consumer in particular, but each of the nodes have its dynamic equation, and there's a maintenance loss, gain from resources, loss to consumers. And that F is the functional response, which is a type 2 to type 3 functional response usually. And the producers have their own dynamic equation as well. Each of them has one equation, gain from producer growth. So this is a logistic growth right there, and loss to consumers. And the key aspect of this model that everyone uses, and that's why they use it, we all use it, because it has this, like each of the key parameters are scaled allometrically. That's the key part. So the parameters, you get them from body sizes directly. So it's easy to parameterize this model. Those parameters are intrinsic growth rate of the producers, metabolic metabolic rate of the consumers and maximum attack rate of the consumers, all scaled with body size. And I guess everyone in this room knows, but I will just say it, that we have this big empirical loss in terms of mass and metabolic rate across all taxa. And the important part that we'll use is the mass-specific metabolic rate, which turns this into a negative, right? And our first attempt to do this, I was really one of the first attempts, more mechanistically, was to combine, integrate, synthesize, let's call it synthesize, this allometric trophic network model with my model of consumer resource interaction with mutualistic interactions. And what we did is basically have a food web generated by the niche model and then convert some of the herbivores into pollinators. They consume floral resources, and we model the floral resources as well, and we have wind-pollinated plants, animal-pollinated plants, and what we found was that, contrary to what May said and many others said, using local terra models, mutualisms actually stabilize the dynamics of these food webs. So that was a big finding published in 2020 in Nature Communications. But we faced, as you all know, you solve some questions and then get thousands more. So summarizing a few of the challenges we faced was the following. First of all, the ATN, the allometric trophic network model, represents fairly well aquatic ecosystems, but not terrestrial ones. So basically what we were doing is modeling pollinators swimming in water, which is it's okay for the first attempt. Second, empirical, and I will keep saying above ground terrestrial food webs. Or well, I will try to say terrestrial food webs, but think when I say that above ground, because things are different below ground. So above ground terrestrial food webs are scarce. So when we wanted to compare our results to empirical networks, we didn't find them. There are very few, and they were not satisfactory to us. So they're scarce, and the ones that exist have very low or uneven resolution. And I will talk about that in the second part of my talk. There's lack of generative models of multiplex networks. So these are, in fact, multiplex networks because they're different types of interactions. And what we did was very ad hoc. We just generated food webs and turned herbivores to pollinators, some of them to pollinators. So we lack those models. So this is to address the first part, this model, like this pollinator swimming in water. So to really do a better ATN for terrestrial food webs, we had this working group in Davis, where is my current institution. We had people like Kim McCann, Justin Jekyll, and others. Like, it was a good combination between empiricists and theoreticians to think about this. And we published this 3 paper on this, which is a bioenergetic framework for above ground terrestrial food webs. So this is all bioenergetics, right? And just to place you in the right mindset, so this is the classical approach in which we have that, and this is how people think about food webs and model them. The key part, as I said, is body mass, right? So that is the x-axis right there. And people, what they do, for example, with the niche model that is pretty known, they give a number that is represent the body mass to each of the species in the system. And then they set a range and a center, feeding center, in which they will eat. So for example, this feeding range is capturing these 3 species with a peak of feeding efficiency right there. So what you have from here is that larger, this is pretty good for aquatic ecosystem because you have like larger fish eat smaller fish, and then you have these herbivores that are small that eat even smaller producers. So zooplankton eating phytoplankton, unicellular phytoplankton. So you have this very clean relationship between body mass and who eats whom. And that's how you build your structure, your food web. Also, what is in this classical approach that works very well for aquatic ecosystems is that as I said, these different parameters in the dynamic model scale with body mass. So that goes into the model. We have a structure, we have a model, dynamic model, and then we run the dynamics and get this type of results. So what is the type of result? So low producer biomass, because there is high herbivore consumption and productions on there. So even when they have a very fast metabolic rate and they produce a ton, this consumption is so high that keeps this in low biomass. So then also because of the structure, the body mass, we have a strong size structure in the predators. So that's the result of this type of modeling. And yes, we get, if you know about aquatic ecosystems, this is more or less what you see in these systems, exactly this. So it works well. What are we proposing? We're proposing, so first of all, why this doesn't work for terrestrial food webs? Because herbivory. We have big trees eaten by small insects. Big thing. It's a first important thing. Second, plants don't quite work the way like phytoplankton works, unicellular, and also herbivores don't only care about the body size of the plant, also they care about the chemicals and the defenses. Defenses are key in terrestrial herbivory, which is not so important in aquatic ecosystems. So now what we say, instead of thinking of we still want an axis, right? That is not body size, but an axis, so everything is simplified for the model. So what we found is this slow, fast growth axis. And if you know about plant ecology, they love this axis. There's a ton of data out there classifying plants in this axis of plant slow, fast growth rate. So this axis will then parameterize the attack rate of the herbivores on the plants, the efficiency, some efficiencies, and handling times, intrinsic growth rate, etc., in the plants equation. So what we have for slow-growing plants, they invest more in structure and defenses. So the woody plants, right, that promote the longevity of their tissues. So they're larger, woodier, less nutritious for consumers. So they have a higher carbon to nitrogen or phosphorus, and they're less digestible, and they're more resistant but less tolerant to herbivory. So each bite of tissue is more valuable and costlier to replace. Then we have, in the other extreme, the fast-growing plants that invest in photosynthetic machinery at the expense of defenses and structural tissue. So they are leafier, more nutritious for consumers, less resistant, but more tolerant to herbivory. And also, we propose to have this axis combined with the animal body mass to build this subweb of the food web, of the herbivore subnetwork structure. That's what we're proposing. And as I said, we can build these models now with the traits using the slow fast axis, and there's plenty of data for that. And what we predict that will happen is that because there are going to be these defenses put in there implicitly in the parameters, so higher handling time, etc., there will be higher producer biomass. Also, lower herbivore consumption and production, yes, because they can't eat all the tissue of the plants. And then weaker size structure. That's what we predict. This is a tree paper. So we are now working on this. So we are now collecting all these empirical data on plant and putting them in the axis and building these models. And it's going really well. But I don't have results beyond these predictions, right? So that's why I say it was going to be conceptual. So again, what we are thinking this is going to happen. So we know from the models and we know from data that this is like the structure, community structure of aquatic ecosystems. We are proposing that these slow fast axes in plants are going to produce this type of community structure and dynamics, which we know from empirical observations that this is the typical comparison between aquatic and terrestrial food webs. And finally, for this part, what we are doing is, in our general research agenda, is thinking of plants in terms of their different tissues. So pollinators consume the floral rewards, these frugivores that actually transport their seeds are consuming the fruits. The typical true herbivores consume the leaves, and those that consume the actual wood. And there are two ways you can model that, just as fixed fractions. So that would be a simpler model because you just have like a fraction of the biomass being eaten in that way from those different nodes in the network. Or you can have dynamic pools. That is what we actually did in the first paper I presented. And that has like these rewards dynamics, flow rewards dynamics, or other dynamics that you would want to model. Okay, so I will finish just by showing the empirical terrestrial food web that we built. I said that we were really frustrated by the data we found. So we said, okay, we're going to do the work. But clearly, so this is the paper. This was done while I was in Michigan in Ann Arbor. So it was on the University of Michigan Biological Station. So this is the most highly resolved terrestrial food web above ground, up to date. And so what are our complaints about the previous one, historic networks? So why they're so badly resolved? Because generally people, when they went to the field, they were more interested on vertebrates, birds, etc. So they coarsely grouped plants and insects. So you have like grass in just one node. And then you have like bird species in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So like insects like Coleoptera. And yeah, you have like hundreds of species of Coleoptera. So that's why they're generally small, and herbivores are disproportionately underrepresented compared to the interaction with the vertebrate predator-prey interactions. So if you're underrepresented insects, then you are really underrepresented the herbivores links. So you're missing all that complexity that then you could combine, but combining them ahead of time before doing the analysis is bad. So we use more than a century of research at the Biological Station. And we use public records and occurrence data and data that this biological station had, especially the species list, and then supplemented all the data we found for the diets in the literature and other public records, and vetted by experts. So that's why you have a long list of authors, co-authors. And this is the network. It's simplified. It has 3,800 taxonomic species, and yeah, many feeding links.
Too much data. Some people are about to pass out.
Actually, it's
Okay, yeah, no, it's about to. This is just the end. So this is all the other food webs. So we compared to 12 existing terrestrial food webs, and to compare across food webs, you need, because they're like size-dependent problems, so you need to compare with null models. And we found that if you combine all the metrics we calculated, that is shown here, we found that these are the smaller networks, which are well predicted by the niche model, the null model that we used. And our network is way over there. And why is it way over there? Because of herbivory. These more specialized herbivores that we know happen in terrestrial ecosystems. And that's the reason for why they're well over there. And for the last part, we have this published there, if you want to know about a multiplex network generating model. And with that, I want to thank you.